in the dusty plains near the Gamtoos River in what is today South Africa's Eastern Cape, a young girl named Sarah Baartman was born sometime in the late 1770s or early 1790s. She came from the Khoisan people, one of Africa's oldest communities, whose deep connection to the land stretched back thousands of years. But in the shadow of Dutch colonial expansion, the world she was born into was already collapsing. Her people's freedom, their land, and their dignity were being stripped away piece by piece under the brutal machinery of European conquest. Sarah's life would become one of the most tragic and symbolic stories in the history of colonialism. A story of how a single woman's body was transformed into a battlefield of race, science, and empire. Before she became known to the world as the Hottentot Venus, she was a child of the Cape frontier, growing up in a time of war and enslavement. European settlers were pushing deeper into indigenous territories, seizing land and establishing farms that depended on forced labor. The Khoisan, once nomadic herders and hunters, were now trapped in systems of servitude that blurred the line between employment and slavery. Sarah was orphaned early. Like many Khoisan women of her time, she was forced to work on Dutch farms and later as a domestic servant in Cape Town. Her life, defined by servitude and vulnerability, reflected the violent realities of colonial South Africa. She belonged to a people who were legally free but socially enslaved, caught in a system that denied them ownership of their labor, their bodies, and even their identities. It was from this world of silent suffering that Sarah's story took a devastating turn. Around 1810, she was approached by two men, Hendrik Keizers, a free black man of Dutch descent, and Alexander Dunlop, a British soldier and entrepreneur. They convinced her, or perhaps coerced her, to travel to Europe, promising wealth and fame. To a young woman with no rights, no family, and no protection, the offer might have seemed like a fragile lifeline, but it was not liberation. It was the beginning of a new kind of captivity. When Sarah arrived in London in 1810, she became an instant sensation. Europeans had never seen a woman like her. They were fascinated, scandalized, and obsessed by her appearance. Her dark skin, her curves, and especially her steatopygia, the natural fat deposits around her buttocks that were common among Khoisan women. To the colonial imagination, her body became the proof of everything they believed about Africa, that it was wild, primitive, and strange. She was given a stage name, the Hottentot Venus. Night after night, she was displayed in circuses, theaters, and private gatherings. Audiences paid to stare at her body, to gawk, to laugh, and sometimes even to touch. Dressed in a tight, revealing costume that mimicked nakedness, she stood as a living exhibit of European fantasy, a grotesque fusion of sexuality and racism that both thrilled and reassured white spectators. The shows were marketed as exotic entertainment, but they were built upon cruelty. Sarah was paraded like an animal, ordered to pose, dance, and perform for strangers. The British press advertised her as a curiosity, a link between man and beast. Behind the spectacle, she lived in poverty and isolation, her body exploited for profit by those who claimed to own her. Eventually, the inhumanity of her treatment drew attention from British abolitionists. Members of the African Institution, including Zachary Macaulay, began investigating whether Sarah was being kept as a slave. In November 1810, the Attorney General of England brought a case before the King's Bench, demanding to know whether she was being exhibited against her will. For the first time, Sarah Baartman stood in a British court. The abolitionists described her as a prisoner, forced to perform like a bear led by a chain. They spoke of her deep sighs, her reluctance, her exhaustion. But her so-called employers claimed she was a willing participant, protected by a written contract that promised her a small income. When questioned in court, Sarah confirmed the story. She said she was not mistreated. She said she was happy. But was she truly free to speak? Historians later concluded that Sarah was trapped in a system that made genuine consent impossible. She was poor, foreign, and powerless. To defy her exhibitors meant starvation or deportation. The court accepted her statement and dismissed the case, allowing the shows to continue. The irony was cruel. The publicity from the trial made her even more famous and her exhibitors even richer. The woman who abolitionists had tried to rescue was now a national spectacle. She toured across Britain and Ireland, displayed in towns from London to Limerick, until finally she was taken to Paris in 1814. There, the fascination with her body took on a new and more sinister form. In France, Sarah was no longer just a performer. She became a scientific specimen. The great minds of European science, led by men like Georges Cuvier, viewed her as a rare opportunity to study the so-called missing link between humans and animals. To them, she was not a person, but a puzzle to be solved, a living proof of racial hierarchy. The Paris exhibitions were cruelly successful. Crowds came to see her, and soon so did scientists. Cuvier, a leading naturalist and the father of comparative anatomy, took a personal interest in her. He saw in Sarah's body a chance to validate the emerging pseudoscience of racial difference. By late 1815, Sarah Baartman's health began to fail. Reports differ on the cause. Some say pneumonia, others venereal disease, but what is clear is that she died in December 1815, barely in her mid-20s. Yet even in death, she was denied peace. Within hours of her passing, Cuvier took possession of her body. He dissected her, studying her bones, brain, and genitalia. In his report, he described her features in grotesque detail, comparing her anatomy to that of apes and orangutans. He wrote about her small ears, her protruding buttocks, her vivacity. Even in her stillness, he sought to turn her body into evidence of inferiority. Cuvier's findings were celebrated in European science. They seemed to offer proof that Africans were less evolved than Europeans, a justification for colonial domination dressed up as biological fact. Sarah's skeleton, brain, and genitals were preserved in jars and displayed at the Muséum National d'Histoire Naturelle in Paris, alongside animal specimens. She had been reduced, once again, to an object, a silent witness to the dehumanizing logic of empire. For nearly 2 centuries, her remains stayed there, a trophy of scientific racism. Generations of visitors walked past her bones without realizing that she had once been a living, breathing woman. To the French scientific establishment, she was a relic of knowledge. To South Africans, she was a wound that never healed. It would take almost 200 years for her story to come full circle. In the 1990s, as South Africa emerged from apartheid, a new government led by Nelson Mandela began re-examining the symbols of colonialism that had scarred the nation's history. Among them was the fate of Sarah Baartman. Her story had resurfaced through feminist and Pan-African scholarship, reminding the world that the foundation of Western science was built upon the exploitation of Black and indigenous bodies. In 1995, President Mandela publicly called for her remains to be returned home. But the process would not be simple. French museums and government officials hesitated, citing scientific and legal complications. Negotiations dragged on for years, often stalling on technicalities about ownership and preservation. But South Africa persisted. Professor Philip Thebiwith Tobias, representing the South African Department of Arts, Culture, Science and Technology, led the negotiations. He appealed not just to science, but to humanity. He argued that Sarah was not an anonymous specimen. She was a woman with a name, a story, a baptism record, and a lineage. To keep her remains on display was an act of continued violence. By 2001, the political momentum had shifted. South Africa's government, now under President Thabo Mbeki, intensified diplomatic pressure. Minister Bridget Mabandla described her return as the repatriation of African cultural heritage from Europe. France finally agreed. In May 2002, after nearly 190 years, Sarah Baartman's remains were flown back to Cape Town. When the plane landed, the nation mourned and celebrated. Her body was received with honor, an act of symbolic justice for a woman who had been denied it in life.